There's a moment in almost every great film where the villain says something, and the audience goes quiet. Not because they're afraid, because they agree. And that silence is the most psychologically revealing thing in the room. We've been told our whole lives that stories are moral instruction, that heroes represent what we should be, that villains represent what we must resist. But somewhere in the last 20 years, something changed. The villains started making more sense than the heroes. And no one in the culture wants to talk about why. Light Yagami picks up the Death Note and makes a decision that millions of viewers secretly consider rational. He has a weapon capable of eliminating every violent criminal on Earth. He uses it. The death toll is real. The suffering eliminated is also real. The world's crime rate drops. The question the show refuses to answer, and the question that haunts every viewer who thinks about it beyond the final episode, is not whether Light was wrong. It's whether the world he was building was worse than the one he found. Thanos watches civilizations collapse under the weight of unchecked consumption. He proposes a solution. It's brutal. It's irreversible. It is, by every measure, monstrous. And yet, in the decades since Infinity War, more academic papers have been written about Thanos' logic than about Iron Man's. Because the logic holds. Not morally, but mathematically. And that distinction, between moral truth and functional truth, is the gap that every truly dangerous mind in fiction has learned to exploit. Here is the uncomfortable pattern that runs through every iconic film antagonist. They are not irrational. They are not insane. They are operating from a worldview that is internally consistent, deeply considered, and almost always born from a wound that the audience is shown in Act 1. The Joker wasn't born wanting chaos. He was built by it. Magneto wasn't born hating humans. He watched them destroy everyone he loved. Walter White wasn't born wanting power. He spent 20 years watching competence go unrewarded. Every villain is a mirror. The question is what they're reflecting. Psychologists call this a closed system of thought, a worldview that explains everything, justifies everything, and requires nothing from the outside world to remain coherent. It is, structurally, indistinguishable from ideology, from nationalism, from revolutionary politics, from religion at its most extreme. The villain doesn't see themselves as evil. They see themselves as the only person willing to do what everyone else is too afraid to admit needs doing. And the terrifying thing? Sometimes they're right about the problem. They're only wrong about the solution. This is why Anton Chigurh is perhaps the most unsettling character in modern cinema. He doesn't enjoy violence. He doesn't desire power. He has simply followed one philosophical premise, that fate is indifferent and humans who believe otherwise are deluded, to its logical conclusion. He offers his victims a choice, not out of cruelty, out of a kind of perverse respect. He is, in the most literal sense, a man of principle. The horror isn't that he exists. The horror is that his principles, followed far enough, produce the same outcomes as malice. Johann Liebert from Monster takes this further. He doesn't kill because he's broken. He kills because he has looked into the abyss that most people spend their lives avoiding. The meaninglessness of existence, the fragility of identity, the complete absence of inherent moral order. And decided that if the world is truly empty, then filling it with terror is as valid as filling it with love. He is the ultimate test of a question philosophy has never fully answered. If there is no objective morality, what exactly is wrong with Johann Liebert? The reason we can't look away from these characters isn't moral weakness. It's intellectual honesty. We recognize, somewhere beneath the violence and the horror, that these minds have followed a thread we've all pulled on and simply refused to let go. Most of us stop when it gets uncomfortable. They don't. And this is the function of the villain in great fiction. Not to show us what evil looks like from the outside, but to show us what conviction looks like when it isn't interrupted by doubt. The hero doubts. The hero hesitates. The hero compromises. The villain does not. And in a world that rewards certainty, that projects strength, that punishes visible weakness, the villain's unwavering clarity becomes its own kind of magnetism. There's a reason children who grow up in chaotic, unpredictable environments are more likely to develop what psychologists call a dominant attribution bias, a tendency to see the world as fundamentally hostile and to adopt preemptive control as a survival strategy. The same structure, elevated to philosophy, produces the world's most dangerous minds. Not because they were born different, because the world taught them something true about itself, and they took the lesson further than anyone expected. The final scene of Breaking Bad doesn't feel like a defeat. It feels like a confession. Walter White, dying on the floor of a meth lab, admits to his wife what he should have said 3 seasons earlier. I did it for me. I liked it. I was good at it. And I was alive. The audience doesn't feel contempt. They feel recognition. Because somewhere in the long decline of Walter White, in the slow corruption of a man who was supposed to represent failure transformed into villainy, we saw something we weren't supposed to see about ourselves. That we, too, want to be good at something so badly that we might not look too carefully at what that something is. The villain isn't the person who answers the question differently than you. The villain is the person who follows the same question to the end.